So as you can probably guess by what I was just doing, I couldn't help myself. Went in last night, checked the video from my runs and timed them, and I saw that not only did the timing make it feel better, but it also did take a little bit of time off of my 0 to whatever acceleration runs. Not a whole lot, like a tenth off the 0 to 30, stuff like that. But decided to go ahead and just try another 2 degrees of advance. So initially it started out at 20, then I put it at 23, and now I'm going to try it at 25 degrees, and that's the base timing at about 2,000 RPM. So I can't say that I really felt a big improvement there, but certainly didn't feel bad. So I'm going to leave the timing at 25. I didn't notice any trouble on and off the throttle or anything like that. I will go in later, check the times, and if I see that it went slower or something like that, then I'll back it off to 23 probably, but I don't anticipate I'll end up doing that. So more or less, I'd be ready to wrap it up. Just start doing cleaning and maintenance for the show at this point. But since I do have this Dr. Pulley clutch just sitting around and I've bedded it in now, that should give it the maximum chance to get a strong grip on there. I will probably go ahead and give that one more try. And I just did a run, as you saw, so I can do one basically back to back with this and give it one last shot. If it doesn't work to any benefit there, then I'm probably just going to go ahead and put my stock clutch back on, and then I'll continue to do maintenance stuff for the show. One more thing, Old Geek Scott from the forums, he said that he's a heavy guy too. He said that a lot of times he runs stiffer pillow springs in his to get a good result. I'm probably not going to try that because, again, I just don't really have a lot of time and I don't feel like screwing around with it back and forth. A lot of different setups right now, but just figured I'd note that in case anybody else wants to try it, or at least so you know I've been told. But to me, they say the strongest, hardest grip is going to be without the pillow springs. So I'm going at it one more time with no pillow springs, the stiffest springs in the box for the clutch springs, and the clutch and bell that have been bedded together, as you saw. Okay, so I went in the house and I checked the video, timed the acceleration runs with the stock clutch, modified stock clutch, and then the Dr. Pulley hit clutch back to back just now, and that's after I did the 25 degree advance. By the way, the 25 degree advance did help it just a little bit for acceleration times, and it looks like the Dr. Pulley clutch is still a little bit slower than the modified stock clutch. It's about a tenth of a second slower to 30, and then gets a little slower after that because it's picking RPM up more than the stock clutch. And again, I'm not exactly sure why it's doing that. I assume something to do with maybe a thickness or how the contra spring can move inside of here. But with that combined with the fact that I can't really get it to get that grab that snatches the front end off the ground, I don't see why I would want to stick with the Dr. Pulley hit clutch at this point. I can't say I have any huge complaints with it, except for the fact that my modified stock clutch basically was free because it came on a scooter or an engine that I was using, and I've got a $10 set of clutch springs in there, where this was $200, and I can't get it to match what the stock clutch did. But it's not bad, it's just not great. Before I move on from that, there is a look at the clutch shoes the friction material on there. It looks like it's getting contact across most of the pads now. It could probably be bedded in just a little bit more, but it's not bad at all. So I don't think that's really what's causing it not to grab. But yeah, I'm going to switch back to the modified stock clutch. Then what I'm going to do is clean the entire CVT. Probably doesn't need it, but won't hurt. And my belt is now down to about 16.25 millimeters, where it should be 18 millimeter. So I'm going to switch out for a new belt. And then once I get done cleaning that up with a new belt and everything, I'll probably take it for some tests and just make sure the wider belt doesn't require more tuning, because it could be that it drops RPM too much or something like that, and I need to adjust the slider weight. I'm going to put an extra 0.5 millimeter spacer between the drive boss and the drive face here, because this belt is so thick. I want to make sure I get the maximum travel, or at least near max travel. I don't want to space it out real far. Taking a bit of the scenic route this morning, because with a new belt in here, I don't like to just romp on it as soon as I put a brand new belt on. I do like to give them a little bit of a kind of a break-in period. It ain't going to get too much, but at least not make my very first runs just going down the road and going wide open throttle from a stop back to back. Well, I got 14 miles on it and this looks flat enough, so see how bad it is. Definitely lower RPM. I doubt this thing's even going to do a wheelie anymore. Let's close that. This is what it looked like when I pulled the CVT cover off, and my belt travel is better than I expected it to be. It's not perfect, because I know it can ride at least to the outside edge of this, if not sit a little higher in there. But that's better than I expected it to be, considering how it was running. Since I knew that I got better travel before when I was using my old variator, I thought, let me just take out the old variator and the fan for it, fixed half, whatever, and just take a look at everything and see if I can see any obvious difference here. So the variators themselves, just like I thought, they're the exact same part number on both of the actual variator housings. They have a different ramp plate and they use different drive bosses. That way, as you can see, one's for a large crank and one's for a small. Oddly enough, for the small crank, they put the splines in there, and for the large crank, they don't even bother with the splines. But it's worked fine either way, essentially. And I thought maybe the recess was a little different in the drive faces, but it's really not. I haven't measured it, but it's pretty close. And then I looked at the drive bosses, and that's where it became obvious. If you look at the two of those side by side, this is the large spline version, and this is the one I've been using with this engine for the small spline, the small crank. And clearly there is a length difference there in the drive bosses. So even with my millimeter of spacing, it doesn't look like I would be as long as the one that I had been using, but I'm going to measure those to find out. So here's the drive boss for the smaller crank, and I get 43.17 millimeter length. And then for the larger crank, I get 44.95. So I've got basically 1.8 millimeters of difference. That was the spacing I normally use for any size belt. Even worn belts, I would use the spacer in there, and I had about 45.43 millimeters. And then this is what I had with the extra spacer when I just installed the new drive belt, and I had 44.15. So yeah, I'm still 1.34, something like that, millimeters off. I put together a selection of shims here to work with this shorter drive boss for the small crank, and it's 45.44 millimeters in length. And I measured the larger drive boss with a shim that I normally use at 45.43 millimeters, so that's about as close as you're going to get. So I'd like to try it this way. What I foresee is that I'm going to end up having clearance issues because, one, I'm not sure that these smaller cranks can even support that, and two, I know before my drive face, the fan here, fan blades, were running into that spring, that kickstart spring. So I don't know that that's even feasible to do, but I'm going to at least see what happens if I can get it together that way. There's one thing I'm really not liking here, and that is that I barely have any splines sticking out past the drive face. And it will engage with my kickstart gear here, but it leaves a lot to be desired. I'd like to get more depth on there, just to be sure that's not going to strip the threads. So I may have to give up maybe a ½ millimeter of that spacing, which would still put me at basically 45 millimeters versus 44 where I was before. I think I'd rather try that than risk stripping out the splines here. And that still leaves the belt free, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. That might actually be better anyway. So now, let's see if the CVT cover actually works. Alright, well that's definitely not going to work because I can't get the motor to move because the fan is now really running into that end of the kickstart spring. And aside from that issue, the kick gear here that interacts with the kickstart gear, the pawl or whatever that's on the crankshaft, is like super close, so it would probably be grinding on that all the time. So something's got to change here. Not sure how good of an idea this is, but this starter pawl is about 3.1 millimeters thick on the bottom, and I don't want to take off too much because I don't want it to fail, but it's not using probably more than a millimeter of that. I don't really want to go more than a millimeter. I'm going to at least try taking off a ½ millimeter or so and see where that ends up. You can see that leaves the splines needing some attention. They're kind of clogged up. But I've got a little triangular file here, so I'm just going to work those over until it looks good. So you can see the splines are looking a lot better now. I did measure, I cut off a ½ millimeter. And that puts the splines on the crank about where I'd want them in there. They're setting ½ millimeter, maybe a little more deep inside the pawl here, so that looks pretty good. I don't think that ½ millimeter that I took off is going to be enough to solve the issue with the kickstart, but it has to at least help. I put the CVT back together, and it looks like that could possibly be enough to help with the interference of the kickstart parts. I don't know that that's actually enough, but before I go any further, I'm going to work on the fan blades here, see if I can do something about those. There's how that ended up, and to be honest, I didn't measure how much I took off. I just basically cut it until I thought maybe it looked right, and we'll see how that worked for me. Well, good news is I can turn this over by hand, and I'm not seeing any kind of witness marks here on my variator fan as if it's hitting that spring at all, making any kind of contact. I have very, very little clearance between the two kickstart gears in here on the crank and then the CVT cover. I'm not sure that that's going to be sufficient, but I think it's enough that I'll probably just fire it up and see if it works or not. Fuel turned off. Yeah, it really helps to have your fuel on. Good job. Yeah, that'll do it. Alright, let's try this again. Could be that it's like super humid today and almost 90. Damn lag. Now I'm a little bit lost because the transmission seems to work better. I think it likes having the additional spacing, but the lag is still there, and while I'm not certain, I believe that is because of the changing weather conditions, and I think this combo is probably just more picky than I would like it to be. At this point, I'm really glad I'm not running a pod filter. I'm at least trying to use a stock-ish air box, because it'd probably be even worse. But it seems to be responding to the weather as far as I can tell, because it kind of fluctuates up and down, whether it's good or bad. And lately, the weather keeps changing quite a bit in the last week or so when I've been tuning it. So today, when I was tuning, right after I was done with that test ride, I went in and it said it was about 86 degrees and 55% humidity. And then I checked for tomorrow at the beach, and it says it's going to be about 70 degrees. One site says about 77% and another site says 56% humidity. So they can't even really agree on that, but either way, the air should be more dense tomorrow at the beach than it will be here today. And when I last tuned this thing, was messing with a needle and found that it wanted more fuel. That was a little bit cooler day with considerably less humidity. So I'm hoping maybe when I go to the beach, it'll just kind of run better because the temperature or conditions are more similar to what it liked when I last tuned the needle. I can always carry tools with me, especially since it's going in the truck, to just quickly change the needle settings if I need to. I'd really like to just have it set up right now so that I knew it was running hard before I even left. But I don't see a whole lot of point of changing it all around when tomorrow the conditions are just going to change quite a bit and it might be wrong again. So for now, I guess the idea is I'm just going to leave it how it is. Again, I'll plan on, if I really have to, I can change the needle setting. And I'm going to change out the spark plug just so I know it's got a fresh plug in it. I'm going to check like the header fasteners, make sure the head studs are good, just go over a few fasteners here and there, and then I really need to clean up like the wheels and some of the aluminum because it's pretty nasty between leaking coolant with the 103cc and the fact that they have tarred and chipped pretty much all the roads, all the side roads or back roads near me in the last week or two. Here's a look at the spark plug. This is the only spark plug I've had in this thing, and this is the BR10 EG. And you can see it's washing itself clean. So it doesn't have any appearance of running lean anywhere. Where it's not washed clean, then it's basically black. A couple of hours before I was going to leave for the beach, and I looked at the local weather, and it appears that right now it's pretty similar here to what it should be at the beach for today as far as temperature and humidity. So I'm going to just let it warm up for a few minutes, and then I'll take the scooter around the yard, and if it's still got that bad hesitation, I'm going to try changing the needle position and see if I can get anywhere with that. Right now this feels much better already. Yeah. I hope it stays like this. Well, what do you know, I actually made the right decision for a change. Leaving it alone yesterday seemed to be the right thing, because now it is running very well, at least around the yard. I couldn't tell you what it does up top, but I'm quite happy with the way it just acted with a trip around the yard. So I'm going to go ahead and try to load it up so I can head to the show in a bit. As you can see, I've got it loaded up and ready to go. So this is basically the end of the 86cc TPR build series. I'm sure you'll see more about it in the future. But as I said at the beginning, my real purpose of building this thing right now was so I had something that I could take to the car show. So I've got H2O in Ocean City, Maryland. I'll probably go today and maybe tomorrow. And then in 2 weeks from now, there is the Endless Summer Cruising. And I'm hoping to have one of the forum members with a Athena Evo 80cc Zuma come down. Same guy you might have actually seen in one of my earlier videos about having a riding buddy for a day. So that's a lot of the reason why the thing's loaded up in the truck, because when I've got somebody coming down, and with all the troubles I've had with the 103 not sealing, as much as I don't like what I call a trailer queen, something you've got to tow around everywhere and you can't ride, I just don't want to risk that I blow this engine up going back and forth 70 miles each way to the beach, and then I can't ride around with a dude that's going to come all the way down from Pennsylvania. So that's about it. Really appreciate everybody that's watched this. As usual, thank you for watching, and subscribe, ring the bell so you get all the notifications of videos and activity. Like the video if you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon.